Well, good morning. We do want to begin just by thanking you so much for your prayers and your support over these years. We have been with you all from the beginning almost of our deputation, when y'all were meeting back in the museum and then after in the small house that was there. We were part of all that in the beginning, and we've appreciated your support all these years, and it really is a blessing. Many of y'all have come to us and have asked about how things are going, and so maybe in the first part of our media presentation, we'll tell you a little bit about the transition that the Lord has directed us to. We've been in the United States since December of last year, and we felt after a long time of prayer and seeking the Lord that it was time for us to move on from Cameroon. It wasn't an easy decision. It was difficult. We had spent 18 years there in Cameroon. But many of you all may have heard of some of the security situations that had come upon us, and we tried everything we could to stay there. We even thought about different areas that we could go to, but I think it was just the accumulation of things that had happened that we felt like it was time to move on. And we're thankful for how the Lord directs and leads, and we depend so much upon Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. I don't know if some of you all have that as your life verse, but I think both Carol and I view that as our life verse, to trust in the Lord with all of your heart. Sometimes our hearts, we don't even know what's going on there, but we have to still trust Him with all of it, even the part we don't understand. But trust in Him with all your heart. Lean not unto your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will direct your paths. And so we're thankful for how the Lord directs and leads. Cameroon is a dangerous place in so many words, but especially in the northern part of Cameroon where the Boko Haram have come in. You may have known the Studdards and the Wrights and the Bachman family. They were there for a number of years, and they had to move on because of the influx of the terrorists in that area. In our area, it wasn't so much the problem of the Boko Haram. In fact, there was no problem with that, but it was more the youth and the unemployment and these bandit gangs and things like that that just accumulated. And so we did not feel at all safe to continue there. That doesn't mean that the missionaries who are there are in danger. You know Ellen Doyle, and the Lord has preserved her life and a number of times just from the cancer that she had gone through, and she'll tell you all about that, I think, in a little while. The Lord has watched over her, and we know that God has her right now, right there in Cameroon, and the Lord will continue to watch over her, and the Burla family too. It's just, I think we each have a different tolerance for danger, and given our background and given different things that have happened, we felt it was time to move on. So I'll leave it right there. If you have any other questions about that, feel free to come to us. I think what we'll do is we'll kind of give you an overview of what's going on this whole year, as we're seeking the Lord's will. And it'll kind of give you an insight into, well, what happens when a missionary is not sure where to go next. They know the Lord is asking them or showing them to move from the field. Well, what do you do next? And so what we've been doing this year is visiting our churches and thanking them for their support and letting them know about the direction that the Lord is leading us in. And some of the things that we've done this year are to take some trips overseas. So let's maybe look at that, or maybe, how do we start this? Let's just give you a little overview of our family here. This is how we looked when we first started out, even with the wrong spelling on our prayer card. We had to get that redone. But just kind of give you a little overview of the pictures of our family. We're so thankful that the Lord has given us 5 children. And when we first started to Cameroon, this is what we looked like. And of course, there were fears and trepidations about taking our whole family over there. But again, the Lord kept assuring us, no, I'll be with you, Walter. I will watch over you. And the Lord has. Our whole time there, we've enjoyed the Lord's presence and His direction in our lives. We served the Lord for 18 years in Cameroon, and we count it a real privilege to have done that. We're involved in a number of different ministries there in Cameroon, and maybe just a little update about what's going on in Cameroon. 3 years ago, we began a church plant in the city of Bafoussam. It started off as a Bible study in a single-room apartment, and there were a number of people that were coming to that at that time, and eventually we moved to a small building in town. And we're thankful Nationals are assuming more responsibilities of the ministry, and they really are considering it as their own. So we were encouraged to see how the church has grown, and they've gotten to the point where Mark Barilla, who's the leader of the church, has been able to purchase some land in town, and they've been able to build a small building there, and we're excited to see how everyone is getting involved with that ministry. As you know, we had spent about 10 years of our ministry in Fumban and Fumbot. It's a largely Muslim region, and it's encouraging to see how those works are continuing to go on. It's really a strategic region in that whole area. Islam has come in, and what a blessing that we are freely given liberty to bring the gospel to anyone there, and over the years we've had that and enjoyed that liberty. National pastors that we trained are leading those ministries, and that's really encouraging to see. It was a privilege for me to be able to train them, and other men also with our mission that were there, and then to see them ordained and then go on to be pastors in the ministry. It was a blessing to have Pastor Fant with us as well. He had come a number of times, and Gretchen and Abby was with us as well to help with our homeschooling, or maybe she was just Elizabeth. Elizabeth, I'm sorry. Yeah, all those Fants look alike. But one of the enjoyable aspects of the ministry that every aspect is enjoyable, but one particularly that I enjoyed was the evangelism and the openness that the people had as you handed out tracts. We would have tracts that were put into different colors, and we'd have yellow, pink, blue, red. And as I would hand one out, they would say, well, what about the red one? Or what about the blue one? And there was a real hunger. I think there was a curiosity mainly to see what you were handing out and reading, but people would just stop there and they would read through the entire tract. And so that was a great opportunity to give the Word of God into their hands that they could use for further study for themselves and to follow up. Every week I would go into the market and hand a tract out and then go on, and then next week I would come with a different one and ask them, did you read that one? And so it offered many good opportunities to witness. One of the tracts that we particularly found useful and helpful to people was one entitled Hope. Maybe Carol can explain a little bit further.
In Cameroon, many people are searching for hope, just like here in the U.S., but I was particularly drawn to the sick and the suffering. And the Lord, particularly our last term in Cameroon, I think he just treated me to something that would be very special to me. And that is, I had the privilege of actually doing OBGYN. Again, you may recall that for at least 10 years we were in a place called Fumban, which was a Muslim town, and there I was the prison doctor. And I loved it, but 90+% of the patients were men. And I had trained in OBGYN. They didn't really care, but it was a strange fit. And then the Lord let me in the last term work in a hospital. This is a missions hospital several hours from our home. But what we would do is that once a month we would spend a week at this hospital, and Walter would have the privilege of evangelizing patients and families while I was able to work in the hospital. And I was able to work with a group of surgeons that are doing their residency, and these are all African surgeons that will go back to their own country, and some countries have 2 surgeons. So to be a part of that, to me, it was a real treat. But on top of just being involved in that training program, I was able to deliver babies again instead of treating men with infected toenails or whatever. And I just marvel at the way the Lord gives us a passion for what he calls us to, and my passion is medicine. And to me, the image in my head is that medicine gives hands to the Lord's heart. So I've just been privileged to use that in different ways in Cameroon.
I think if we had to summarize our ministry in one word, it'd be difficult to do, but if we had to, we would say the word would be sowing. Sowing the seeds of the gospel and sowing the word of God in the lives of men, faithful men who would be able to teach others also. And what a blessing to have seen that and to see those works continuing on. As you remember, continue to pray for Ellen, of course, and also Mark Barilla as they lead up the ministries and as they continue to plant churches in Cameroon. So as we were praying about where to go next, obviously we thought about different areas within Cameroon. Nothing there we felt would be any different from what our situation was in Bafoussam and in Fumban and Fumbot, where we were. So there was an opportunity that arose to go to Benin. I don't know if any of y'all know Jack and Jenny Mitchell, Brian Bell with Grace Dental and Medical Missions. They have a really neat ministry of going into areas, using medicine, and particular dental work, to reach out into the really far bush areas in different countries. And they've been all over the world. And one area that they've actually been able to start a clinic is in the area of Benin. Many people ask, well, where is Benin? Benin's about 2 countries over from Cameroon. Right in the middle there is Nigeria. And so Benin is just to the west of Nigeria. Of all the countries we've been in, I think Benin is the poorest of countries that we've seen. Many people still subsist or exist by subsistence farming. Cotton is a cash crop, and it's amazing what these men will do in sowing their fields with simple hand implements. Oxen and cart are the basic mode of transportation, and those same oxen that are yoked together will plow their whole fields. And it really is amazing. They work so hard in a difficult climate. Really economically, environmentally deprived, you could say. But right in the middle of this region, which is largely Muslim, almost 95% Muslim, there is a group of believers that have come to Christ. They actually call that area where some of the believers are and the church is located Bethlehem. The Muslims look at that and say, that's Bethlehem over there. But Carol can tell a little bit about how that clinic was started and what the burden they have as far as reaching people through that clinic.
I've been to Benin 3 times. Walter's been there twice, and we're scheduled to go again in March. So you can see that Benin really has become a place very special to us. And I think it might be interesting to you, since we have a little longer in Sunday school, to tell you the history of this clinic, how it was born. There have been missionary presence in Mali and Niger and Benin for 50 more years. So there is a national pastor there, and but the setting is extremely remote. This clinic is surrounded by cotton fields, camels, donkeys. It's as remote as you can picture in your mind, and very arid, sub-Saharan. One of the pastors there, who is saved thanks to missionary work among these Muslim people, he had a child who, when he was 2, died of cerebral malaria, and he died because there was nowhere to take his child. He knew he was sick, he knew he was dying, but what do you do in a cotton field where there's no medical help? So it was a burden to him to have medical help, but not only for himself. He's really burdened, unusually so, for the Muslims around him. And so he started praying that the Lord would raise up a medical work. And of his own initiative, he's a pastor, he's not anything medical, but he even opened a small little one-housed hut and bought some medicines, found a young girl in the village who's about 18. She had a little bit of nursing background, and he put her there with the medicines and said, you know, at least dispense these. And she had some simple protocols she could follow, like a cookbook, and she was doing that to serve the people. And so when Grace Dental and Medical Missions came to this part of Benin, they said, well, we're interested in starting a clinic. It was like a marriage, you know, his dream and their dream. So that's how this clinic was started. And I was able to be in Benin before the clinic was built and as it was built. And more recently, we were there as it's been completed. And it's overwhelmingly successful, to the point that there's one doctor there right now. It's so neat because it's multicultural. He's Lebanese, his wife is Filipino, but they're both Americans, and he's trained in America as an emergency room doctor. And so he's seeing patients. When I say seeing patients, there are about 200 people that consult him alone in one day. They start lining up at 2 a.m. They send them away, say you can't line up this early. They're back by 5. He can see approximately 75 per day, so they're sending the majority away. Some are walking from other countries to get there, from Niger, just to come. So he is overwhelmed, and they're coming because the clinic is compassionate and it's competent. It has medicine. Many African clinics, you get there and they're simply out of medicine. But what he's working with are people from that village that he's trained. So he doesn't have, let's say, a nurse from the U.S. or even a nurse who's been trained in an African environment to the level of a nurse. So he's an ER doctor working with people from the village that he's trained to help him. So there's a chasm between the two. So he's in constant demand. So the reason we're going back in March is that we're going to give him a break. And he and his wife are going to get out of the country and go to a medical meeting in Greece. So I'm very excited, and we would covet your prayers. But while I'm involved in the clinic, the beautiful thing about Benin, is that there's a teaching opportunity, and Walter is teaching in a Bible Institute while I'm in the clinic. And the people speak the language called Dindi. The country is supposed to be French, but this area is so remote, about 90% of people only speak Dindi, so we always had to use a translator, except in the clinic where the clinic workers have enough education that they can speak English. But largely, we had to have a translator. But in my mind, there is a language that doesn't need translation, and that's compassion. It was just a joy to have compassion on these people, and I was particularly burdened for the women. In a Muslim culture, women are among several wives to their husband. Many husbands have 3, 4 wives. We've been to a funeral of someone who had 20 of them. And so really you're almost property of your husband, and your husband is not someone that you love the way we sense love in marriage, at least generally not in West Africa. It's more like he's your security so that you will be able to eat, and your children. But if your husband dies, your children belong to him, and his family can take them. So it's difficult. So just to be compassionate to these women, to reach out and to touch them, to me, it was just a very special opportunity. And pictured here, it's the clinic, and you can see people already lining up, waiting to be seen.
And so as we're thinking about, maybe Benin would be a place that we could go to. Obviously, there are great needs there. We can help out in the Bible Institute and also in the medical work. But the problem, as Carol mentioned, was the Dindi language. And both Carol and I aren't sure at this stage in life we can be able to dedicate the time and effort that would be necessary to learn a completely new language. So we do, and we can envision continuing to go back there on short-term basis to help with them, and that's what we hope to do for now. One other thing that we were able to do this year was also take a trip to Haiti. We were introduced to that ministry. Again, it has a medical ministry, and there's a teaching ministry. And so naturally, when we heard about it, we said, well, let's go and let's see what the ministry is like and see if we could be used there as well. And what a blessing to see what the Lord is doing in Haiti. They have been ravaged by earthquakes and by hurricanes, and there's a tremendous amount of need that is there for just the physical needs, and a lot of people are coming in there, and that's a blessing to see. One of the things that the ministry there is involved with is a camp work. Camps Abroad from the Wilds came and helped them to establish this camp, and what a blessing to see that reaching out into the area. The churches are basically national run. There's not many missionaries that are actually doing the churches. They've been able to train the nationals, and now those nationals are doing the work of the ministry to the point where the nationals are teaching in the Bible Institute. And so as we came there, we were looking at the needs, but we were thinking, wow, the nationals are already doing the work of the ministry. And one of the things that a missionary should be doing is working to no longer have a job and to see the nationals doing the work of the ministry. And so we were really encouraged by that, to see how the Lord has raised them up to do that. The medical needs are really overwhelming there as well. I don't know if you want to mention anything about that, or
well, in terms of the church aspect, the Bible Institute, the camp, we were so touched that it really was the nationals, and we had a meeting with them about should we move to Haiti and help out. And we basically asked the question, isn't that making you go backward? You're already ahead. But there were medical works. There had been the presence of a large mission board who built a very large, sprawling hospital there. But that missionary presence left as the work was nationalized. But that was extremely hard on the hospital. It was unlike the seminary. The hospital could hardly cope with the loss of the doctors and nurses that left at the same time. But it overwhelmed me. We went into that hospital, and there were 3 operating rooms, and some of them actually just, you could tell that they were past their glory days. And I am not an administrator. I couldn't imagine trying to resuscitate a hospital. That's more than a patient. And so to me, the work, medically speaking, seemed really, I would just say it just seemed beyond me.
So another area that we had been recently aware of were some needs that were in France, actually. And we heard of some pressing needs that were there. And so with some guidance from some missionaries in France, we took a tour de France, we could say. We literally made a circular trip visiting some veteran missionaries that were there, and we're greatly blessed by that trip. We've used French all our time in Cameroon. There are some English-speaking areas that we did have ministry in, some, but for the vast majority of our time was using French. So both Carol and I are fluent in French, maybe not as fluent as, well, put it this way. Growing up and learning French and using French in Africa, people would liken our French to kind of like tap dancing. But the French are kind of like ballet dancers, and so we're not exactly ballet dancers yet. We're kind of still tap dancing with our French. But we were able to communicate, and we were thankful to be able to see. Really, one of the things that just impressed me, and Carol as well, was just the multicultural aspect of the ministry that is there in France. It's really a melting pot of all kinds of people that come in. In some suburbs within Paris and other large cities, 40% of the population are foreigners. Only 2 to 3%, from what we can understand in France, are actually Protestant. France has the largest Muslim population in Europe. In some cities, they represent 25% of the population. They've had a huge influx of refugees and others that are coming in. And like Germany and other areas, the local indigenous French population and German population, they often will have maybe 1 child, maybe 2, and sometimes none. And then often the refugees and others who come in, they have more and more children. So really the population is growing even within Europe, but France as well, of foreigners who are there. So that represents a tremendous opportunity, really, to reach out to these people groups. We were able to speak in a church in Saint Martin. What was the name of that quartier?
I've forgotten. It's near Paris.
Yeah, there's a quartier in France. Saint-Denis. It's one of the larger churches in the area, and it's pastored by a man from Saint Martinique. And his assistant pastor there is from India. None of these pastors are fully supported. They work and are also at the same time doing the work of the ministry. And we're really encouraged by what they're doing to reach out to the communities. As you looked at the church, it was just a complete multicultural assembly. You had Indians, you had Africans, you had Asians, people from the Caribbean, and the local French people as well. And so as we looked at France and the needs that were there, we're encouraged by the fact that we have an opportunity to continue to reach out to Muslims and to other foreigners. There were 3 regions that particularly impressed us. We were able to visit the Normandy region. Many of you may know the Websters. They were a number of years missionaries in Quebec. And the Lord called them to leave Quebec and actually set up in this area in Normandy. And he's working with a group that has both national leadership there already, but he's helping to lead and to guide them. And what a blessing to see their work. While we were in Normandy, of course, we were thankful to have had the opportunity to go and visit the beaches of Normandy. some of those World War II sites where we see this incredible courage and sacrifice of men who fought for our freedom as they came in to liberate France from the German Nazis, and they came into Europe right through this region in Normandy. And what a challenge as we went through that cemetery area, and you can't help but be moved. There was a granite wall that had these words on it: "They gave up their future for ours." And really, you can't help but be moved as you see the sacrifice that these men made and the incredible, really, obstacles that they had to overcome. And I was just moved as I went through the museum and the visitor center they had there, and they had a section there on obstacles. And they listed all the obstacles these men had to overcome, the beaches and what were there, and the forces that were against them. And I just couldn't help but thinking, you know, there's such a parallel between missions and warfare, and how it's an allied effort that has to go forth. You have the men on the front field, on the front lines, but then you have the others that are supplying behind, and you have obstacles to overcome, and you don't just stop because there are obstacles. You continue to go forward. There were a number of things that just really blessed, but the courage, determination of these men to overcome these obstacles, and the great personal sacrifice were real challenge and blessing to us. So you really can't help but want to imitate them. We have a more important or a greater cause. It's a great cause that they had. I don't want to minimize that, but how much more important we have to liberate men and women and children from their slavery to sin and to Satan, and to be able to go forth and bring the gospel to them as well. A second area that we went to was, we went to a number, but this area particularly impressed us. Not so much the region, the French Riviera. Well, it was beautiful, but it wasn't, super exciting. But we were really impressed with the missionaries that were there. And we were really blessed to be able to meet the Barnes family. He grew up in Algeria as a missionary kid. He speaks French fluently, perfectly. He also knows a number of Arabic dialects, and he has a burden to reach out to Muslims for many, many years. And what a blessing to be able to meet with them, to talk with him about Muslim evangelism, but also to see his work and the work that they're doing to try and start a church, or they have already. They've started a church in this region to reach out particularly to French-speaking people and French nationals. And I was greatly blessed to see him. Many of them, the people within France, view him as a role model, view him as kind of the leader of their groups that are there, and he really was an inspiration to us. It's difficult planting churches within France. Some people have likened it to planting seeds in cement. It's difficult in that many people have no sense of really wanting to know God, and their whole educational system has almost made them too skeptical about anything, that to hear the truth is even difficult to begin to give the truth. And so it's a difficult field, but we see there are tremendous needs that are there. Our last part of the trip was the Algrange Bible Institute, and this was an area that we particularly wanted to see because of the needs that were there. There was a pressing need with regard to the leader of the institute, who is retiring, and they really need help there. And so Algrange is located close to Luxembourg, right near the border there of Germany. And we noticed again there's a large multicultural aspect to the area. We're standing in front of the institute. They have purchased all of the property that is there, really nice buildings, and even student housing next to it. Students from France, the Caribbean, even from Africa have come to the school, and there's a rotation of pastors that come in and teach block classes, and but there are others who are on site who are also watching over the work of the ministry there. And it was a blessing to meet even some of the pastors who come and to teach there, and they really see the Institute as a primary means of training national leaders and even helping lay leaders within the church to grow in their understanding of the Bible and in their doctrine. And so we really see it as a key ministry within France itself, as far as one of the places where people can come to do further ministry training. These are the Vissers, a wonderful couple who have dedicated their lives to the Institute and who have served there many, many years. We discussed over pastries the needs of the ministry that was there, and pray for us as we are seriously considering this area. We can see France as a stepping stone still to go into Africa. As we've talked with the people at the Bible Institute, they have mentioned that that part of the school year, of course, is the summertime would be free for us to be able to go on these trips. And really, they can work around the schedule to where we could continue to take trips at other times of the year. And so we kind of see France as a stepping stone to continue to work into Africa and to take these mission trips and training national pastor trips, but then also to be right there in France and to be involved in a ministry that really is so needy, and to be involved with also some church planning efforts that are going on. So that's what we're thinking at right now. We still need to talk further with our extended family, our immediate family, and our mission board, but that's the way we're leaning in. So do pray for us with regard to that.
One thing specifically to pray about is the medical work. In West Africa, they're saying, please come and help us. I just described to you how overworked the doctor is. When we were in France, one of the missionaries who'd been there for 20, 30 years said, do not put on your application that you're a doctor. They'll deny it. They don't want doctors here. The unemployment rate in France is about 10%, and even for professionals, so they don't want outsiders necessarily taking the place of their own French people. And so for me to practice in France, it actually will be difficult if I'm able to at all. But I personally wouldn't want to necessarily go in and do obstetrics in a hospital in France. But what I would like to do is to target a subculture like the gypsies. There are a lot of gypsies in France. Find a subculture, maybe refugees, but in order to lay hands on them, to treat them, I would need some recognition. As a physician, you wouldn't expect someone from France to just come over and start treating people here with no recognition from our government. You count on the government to make sure that that person is qualified. So that is really a big prayer request for me, because I honestly don't know how I'll be able to get that in France. But the beautiful thing is we are hoping to use France like a trampoline and go back into West Africa. We're going next month back to Cameroon. And that might sound a little bit funny, we just got out, but it's just Walter and I going, and we're going to go to that hospital that you saw earlier. I actually have to do some OBGYN this year to keep my certification, and I can't just go into the Anderson Memorial Hospital and say I'm here, but I can go back to Cameroon where they desperately need some help and use my skills. Walter will visit the churches we planted. Eddie and Lydia won't be with us. Part of the security issue is just not for ourselves, it's having our children in that environment. So Cameroon is having difficulties right now, not an out-and-out civil war, but there's tension between the English-speaking and French-speaking people, and we're going to be in a tension area. So we appreciate your prayers, but we do that in November and back to Benin in March, and looking to France as the Lord leads. So we are so grateful for your prayers. You can see how much wisdom that we need. And just, we were very grateful for this church. You've been behind us for 20-something years, and it's like a family, so thank you.
So that kind of gives you an idea of the different ministries that are there, and it's really great to see all the Lord is doing all around the world. I mean, you can go anywhere in the world, really. There are needs everywhere. And as we were thinking about that, even the other day, I mean, you can go down into some back roads in Anderson, and there's nobody there. They need the gospel there as well, and Greenville and Rock Hill. I mean, what we want to do is simply be where God wants us to be. And so pray for us. Lord will give us assurance with regard to some of these decisions, that we'd have wisdom in that, and that we'd simply do what the Lord would have us to do. I don't know, maybe somebody has some questions in the last few minutes that we have here, something that came to your mind as we went through the presentation, or if Carol has any last items. Anything come to mind? So, yes. They're from 15 to 25. So Eddie and Lydia are with us. I think they're with the youth group. Lydia's 15, Eddie's 18. Then we have a 21, 23, and 25-year-old. Yes. Yes, the question was if we would be taking over the leadership of the Bible Institute. I think it would be kind of a transition time. The pastor that's there, the leader, there's a president of the institute, there's a leader of that institute. I think we would initially just be helping out with the leadership. They have a combined effort that's going toward the school. There's not one person completely in charge of everything. So I think we would be one of the leaders involved in that work. Yes. Well, fortunately, we have our oldest daughter, Mary Margaret. She's a church secretary at University Baptist Church, and she's also staying with us right now. So she's going to watch over them. We have a house in Anderson. Before we even left to go to the field, we had some advice from veteran missionaries that it'd be good to try and find a house, and so we've done that, and that's been a blessing. So. And that's actually where we met the Fants a number of years ago. We knew them from Anderson, but then back at University Baptist Church as well. So, yeah, it's a blessing to see Marsh. We remember him when he was this little, but what a blessing, really, to see him maturing and growing and see him leading this church. We had a great session the other day where all of the missionaries came together, and he presented some things, and Drew as well. It was a real blessing. You guys are really blessed to have Marsh, and I know you know that, but I'm just saying that too.
And I know why he's so time conscious. When I was at their house, when all the boys were young, they would fight over who got to jump on the trampoline. So Gretchen had a timer. They had 5 minutes. And so if he's time conscious now, it started on the trampoline.
Well, thank you all so much, and we'll be.
Their work in the field, and it's amazing to see how God has taken you and what God has done with you in so many years. Let's close with the word of prayer, and then we'll be dismissed until